welcome to TipPad. Today we've got a super cool tutorial for you by digital artist Alba Zapata. It's time to get tough as we're going to create an old school tattoo illustration. I'll show you Alba's Instagram so you can see what kind of illustration she's talking about. Old school is a tattoo style that dates to the beginning of the 20th century, and it's known for its thick and even lines. The themes were usually women, naval or patriotic symbols, as this was a style typically worn by sailors and soldiers. The colours tend to be quite basic and solid, although tattoos in one single ink were also common. As you know, I like a touch of humour in my illustrations, and I also like to mix themes. So in this case, I'm going to bring out my nerdy side again by drawing a soldier, but not the type you're thinking of. For this illustration, I'm going to design a Stormtrooper from the Star Wars saga. The order we're going to work in is sketch, illustration of the main character, decorative elements, old school typography, fill, and details. So let's get to it. To be able to sketch, we need to look at different images for inspiration. I like to use Pinterest because you can make lots of groups of various themes. So I've included stormtroopers, but also real soldiers, to study their poses, weapons, and movements. The sketch I've done is quite basic, but I'll add details further on. You can make your own sketch using pen and paper or an iPad or tablet, whatever you're most comfortable with. But later you'll have to scan the image so you have it digitally, as we'll be working on it in Illustrator. Open Illustrator and create a file in CMYK if you want to print it, or RGB if not. My file is a square of 860 pixels each side. On the layer underneath, paste the sketch and lower the opacity. Create another layer on top, which is where we're going to be working. With the pen tool, select a black stroke with no fill. The stroke needs to be wide to imitate the old school style, as the needles back then were thicker, so you couldn't get thinner or varied lines in the tattoo. That's why there wasn't a great deal of detail, although that didn't mean that the tattoos weren't creative or expressive. I'm going to go for a thickness of 6 points to start off with, although I might change it later. The ends of the strokes should have a slight curve, which you can set in the stroke options. I'll draw the helmet of the soldier with straight lines, and as the head is symmetrical, we only need to draw one half. First of all, use Command R to open the ruler. Click on one of the sides and stretch to make a guide. It's good to have all the guides on a separate layer, so put those we just made on another layer. You can select the guides like a vector. So cut, go to a new layer and paste in front with Command F. Now draw one half of the helmet using only straight lines. And you can do this just clicking on the angles, the points of the helmet, and where there's a curve, you just need to make the other point where the line crosses. So here, like this. When you're drawing a line and you finish it, to make a new one, just press P. Following this technique, finish off the helmet. To round the edges, go to the Direct Selection tool or press A, and then select a point. If you stretch that point without letting go, you'll see the magic of Illustrator CC and how it rounds the point. We won't be able to stretch anymore when we reach the limit that angle allows. So go rounding point by point, and if you need to adjust any of the lines you've made, drag again to remove the curve, and you can adjust it with the Direct Selection tool. And then you would round the point again. When you're done, use the Selection tool, which is usually V. Select everything and duplicate by pressing Alt while you drag. Like this. While this new half is selected, press O to make a symmetry, dragging from right to left. And now we just need to join it with the other side of the head. We'll draw the body the same way we did with the head, with the pen tool and rounding the points as I showed you. To make the weapon, we're going to use another useful tool from the latest version of Illustrator, which is the Shape tool. First of all, make the straight lines of the gun. As soon as you do the first one, the rest have to be an exact copy, so the perspective isn't warped. As I said before, you do this by pressing Alt while dragging the vector with the Selection tool. If some lines are longer than others, remember to press Shift while you stretch them so you don't deform them. To make the cylinder shapes, we're going to make them slightly misshaped, so the perspective isn't too flat. Join the lines that are the same perspective if you can. Then duplicate the circle like you did before so they're identical. Make sure that the lines are touching both circles. Select the shape tool and mark the excess lines like this. When you have the cylinder, select the Expand option. This makes sure that the lines we marked won't appear again. So I'll leave that for later. To make this cylinder that's connected to the previous one, duplicate the shape and make it smaller. But as it's shorter, simply stretch the ends of the lines to make this part shorter. Make the rest of the gun with straight lines and the rounded corner tool, and the parts that need it with the basic shapes and the shape tool. A tip is that you make the whole gun, and then, when you know where it's going, delete the parts that are covering the hands. This way, if you don't like the way the soldier is holding the weapon, you can change it. If you don't make the whole gun, it can be more complicated. So the character is finished. Let's save a copy, which is always useful in case we want to go back. Next, we're going to add some decorative elements and some text. As you see in these examples, most traditional tattoos include decorative elements, not only to accompany the image, but also to complement it visually too. To add a bit of contrast to the serious Stormtrooper, I'll add some old-school flowers inside these circles that I've prepared here. If you want to know how to make these, I'll have a tutorial soon where I'll explain this. I'm going to place them on a layer behind, but I won't delete the excess, I'll just cover it up by filling the Stormtrooper with colour. Next, we'll move on to the banner with the text. To make the banner, use the pen tool like we did for the soldier, but only draw the top line, then duplicate it by dragging it so they're both the same. Join these two lines with another two to turn them into one vector. Now make the ends with the pen by making two shapes. First, this triangle here, and then this pointy part here. On the other side, repeat the process or duplicate and then flip with the reflect tool. To make the sentence that I'm going to insert in the banner, there are two ways. The first is to duplicate one of the most horizontal lines of the banner by selecting it with the direct selection tool. Keep it selected while also selecting the type tool on this path and click on the part on the far left like this. If this happens, where it's upside down, just click here and stretch upwards with the selection tool to make it the right way round again. Now you can write a text on this path, selecting any of the fonts you have installed. There are lots of fonts available for free or paid for that are traditional tattoo style, so just have a look online. The second way to do this is to make the letters manually. This way you can use the same thickness and size for each letter. I have my font already prepared, but I'm going to show you how to make a letter. To make these old school style letters, draw a rectangle and some lines to act as serifs. For the right side, draw another rectangle that goes to the middle of the letter to make those curves of the letter B. Repeat to make the one beneath. And the left side needs to be split in two. You don't need to create the whole alphabet for one sentence, just the letters that you need. Next, you need to use an appropriate kerning or spacing. This is a little tricky to do freehand, and you need a really good eye to do it correctly. A trick is to imagine the spaces between the letters like bowls or containers, and between each letter you need to fit approximately the same amount of liquid. So between the T and the O, the distance should be less than the space between the I and the L. When you've done the sentence, you need to add two transparent shapes at the beginning and at the end here, and another on the top and on the bottom. Then select all and group. Duplicate the part of the banner where you're going to place it and bring that shape to front. Select the shape and our sentence and go to Object, Envelope Distort, Make with Top Object. Now we just need to place this on top of our banner, like this. So we have all our elements. We now need to adjust them properly so everything is balanced and in the right place. When it's ready, make a copy and put it aside. To continue working, now we need to delete the parts that overlap. To do this, go to the Shape tool I showed you before and remove the parts one by one. And when you're done, make a copy and expand. Remember to delete those shapes of transparent fill we made earlier around the text. To add colour to the design, just make a copy in the same place but on a separate layer. Remove the colour from the outline of the illustration and convert it to a live paint. If you want to use gradients or colour halftones, remember these need to be simple to respect the old school style, you need to paint flat colours and expand the live paint. Ungroup the colours and apply a gradient fill to these areas of colour that goes from white to black or any other colour in the grayscale. We can also position the angle of the gradient until we have it where we want. We can do that by selecting the degrees or manually with the gradient tool. Simply select the gap of colour, click on one end and drag to the other. I usually make these illustrations with halftones of colour, and when I get to this point, they're really easy to achieve. When you have the gradients how you want them, just select the gaps that have the gradient and go to Effects, Pixelate, Colour Halftone. In the options of this effect, we need to choose the maximum size for the points, and in the channels, select 0 for all of them. OK. If we want to correct any of these options later, we can do that in the Appearance panel, clicking on the effect that we want to modify, and then we'll get the same tab as before. We can make the gradient vary so it doesn't go from a total white to a total black. We can do this by selecting the sample with the gradient we want to change and varying the colours of that gradient, choosing greys instead of white or black. When you're done with the colour, you can add some details if you want, like a light or shadow, with the pen tool. At this stage, our illustration is finished. We just need to group everything and align to the artboard. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that you've moved a little closer to the dark side. See you next time. Bye!